The fire roared like a hungry demon, turning the peaceful Montana night into a vision of hell. 19-year-old Nora Lawson stood paralyzed on the second-floor balcony of her family's homestead as flames engulfed the staircase below. Smoke billowed around her, stinging her eyes and scorching her lungs. There was no way down and no way out. The inferno had started so suddenly, consuming the wooden structure with terrifying speed while her parents were away in town. Now, as the wooden beams cracked beneath her feet, Nora faced the grim certainty that she wouldn't survive the night. The year was 1876, and death came easily in the Montana Territory. Nora had always known this, but had never imagined her own end would come so soon. The heat pressed against her skin like a physical force, her white nightgown billowing in the updraft from the flames. She could hear the distant howl of coyotes, untroubled by the human disaster unfolding beneath the vast, star-filled sky. The nearest neighbor was miles away. No one would come. No one could possibly see the flames in time. But someone did. Noah Fletcher had been riding late, returning from a 3-day cattle drive when he spotted the orange glow on the horizon. At 24, he'd already spent 6 years as a cowhand, and his instincts told him this was no ordinary campfire. He dug his heels into his horse's flanks, urging the Mustang forward toward the blaze. As he crested the ridge overlooking the Lawson property, Noah saw the burning structure and, illuminated by the flames, the slender figure trapped on the upper balcony. Without hesitation, he spurred his horse down the slope, racing toward the inferno. "Hold on," he shouted, though his voice was lost in the roar of the fire. The heat grew unbearable as he approached, his horse skittish and reluctant. Noah pulled his bandana over his nose and mouth, his eyes watering from the smoke. Nora heard nothing but the crackling flames, saw nothing but shifting shadows through the thickening smoke. Then, miraculously, a horse's whinny cut through the chaos. She staggered to the edge of the balcony, clutching the railing for support as it grew hot beneath her palms. "Jump!" The voice came from below, barely audible above the fire's roar. Through the swirling smoke, she could make out the silhouette of a man on horseback. "I cannot," she cried, her voice breaking in terror. The drop was at least 15 feet. She'd break her legs, if not her neck. "You have to trust me." Noah circled his horse beneath the balcony. "The whole place is coming down. Now." The floorboards beneath Nora's feet groaned and splintered, sending a shower of sparks into the air. It was jump or burn. With a desperate prayer, she climbed onto the railing, closed her eyes, and let herself fall. Noah had only seconds to position himself. He reached up, catching her around the waist as she plummeted. The impact nearly knocked him from the saddle, but he held fast, his arm like a band of iron around her middle as his horse danced sideways in panic. "Hold on," he shouted, turning the frightened animal away from the blaze. Nora clung to him, her face buried against his chest as they galloped away from the collapsing structure. Behind them, the roof of the house caved in with a deafening crash, sending a geyser of sparks skyward. They rode a safe distance before Noah reined in his horse. Gently, he lowered Nora to the ground, dismounting beside her. In the firelight, he could see she was trembling violently, her nightgown singed and her face streaked with soot. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough from the smoke. Nora looked up at her rescuer, seeing him clearly for the first time. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes the color of the Montana sky at dusk. A stranger who had ridden through fire to save her. "No," she managed, though her throat felt raw. "My parents there in town, but our home." She turned to look at the burning ruins of her family's homestead, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her cheeks. "There's nothing to be done for it now," Noah said gently. He shrugged out of his leather coat and draped it around her shoulders. "What's your name, miss?" "Nora. Nora Lawson." She pulled the coat tighter, suddenly aware of her state of undress. "And you?" "Noah Fletcher. I work at the Circle B ranch north of here." He glanced back at the fire, then at the trembling young woman before him. "We need to get you somewhere safe. The Circle B is closest." Nora hesitated. She'd been raised to be cautious around strangers, especially men. But this man had just saved her life, and she had nowhere else to go until her parents returned. "My father will want to thank you properly," she said, her voice steadier now. Noah simply nodded, helping her onto his horse before mounting behind her. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, and despite everything, Nora felt a strange sense of safety in the embrace of this stranger. As they rode away, Nora cast one last glance at the burning remains of her childhood home. Everything she owned was gone. Everything except her life, which she owed to the cowboy whose heartbeat she could feel against her back as they rode through the Montana night. The Circle B ranch was still and quiet when they arrived. The main house stood dark, but a lantern still burned in the bunkhouse. Noah helped Nora down from his horse, keeping a respectful distance once she was on her feet. "The ranch owner's wife, Mrs. Blackwell, should have something you can wear," he said, leading her toward the main house. "She's a good woman. She'll help you." Before they reached the porch, the door to the bunkhouse opened, and a burly man with a thick mustache stepped out. "That you, Fletcher? Where in tarnation have you been? Cattle were delivered hours ago." "Found trouble on the way back, Mr. Daniels," Noah called. "This is Miss Lawson." Her family's homestead burned tonight. Daniels, the ranch foreman, came closer, his expression softening when he saw Nora's condition. "Good Lord, girl, you all right?" "Yes, sir," Nora replied, though she felt far from all right. "Mr. Fletcher saved me." Daniels nodded approvingly at Noah. "Better wake Mrs. Blackwell. She'll know what to do." Within minutes, the ranch house was illuminated with lamplight. Mrs. Blackwell, a kindly woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair, took one look at Nora and immediately took charge, ushering her inside while calling for hot water and clean clothes. "You poor dear," she fussed, leading Nora to a comfortable sitting room. "Thank heavens Mr. Fletcher found you. He's one of our best hands, always had good instincts, that boy." While Mrs. Blackwell tended to Nora, Noah explained the situation to Mr. Blackwell, a stern but fair man who had run the Circle B for nearly 20 years. "Lawrence Lawson's place." Mr. Blackwell stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Good man. His daughter, you say, and the parents are in town?" "Yes, sir. Helena, I believe. Due back tomorrow or the next day," Mr. Blackwell nodded. "We'll send word first thing in the morning. The girl can stay here until they return. You did well, Fletcher." Noah nodded, though praise wasn't what he sought. His thoughts remained with the young woman whose life he'd saved her terror as she jumped from that balcony, her quiet dignity afterward. Something about Nora Lawson stirred him in a way he couldn't quite define. After being bathed and dressed in a borrowed nightgown, Nora was settled into a guest room. Mrs. Blackwell had given her a mild sedative to help her sleep, but Nora found herself staring at the ceiling, replaying the night's events. The heat of the flames, the suffocating smoke, the sensation of falling through darkness, and then the strong arms that had caught her, carrying her to safety. Noah Fletcher. She couldn't stop thinking about him, the cowboy who had appeared like a vision when all hope seemed lost. It wasn't just gratitude she felt, though that was certainly part of it. There had been something in his eyes when he looked at her, something steady and reassuring that made her feel that as long as he was near, no harm would come to her. Sleep finally claimed her, but her dreams were filled with fire and smoke and a tall figure on horseback, riding through the flames to reach her. The following morning, Noah volunteered to ride to Helena to find Nora's parents. It was a full day's journey each way, but he set out at dawn, determined to bring the Lawsons back to their daughter as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Nora tried to make herself useful around the ranch, despite Mrs. Blackwell's insistence that she rest. Being idle left too much time for dark thoughts about all she had lost, so she helped with cooking and mending, grateful for the Blackwells' kindness to a stranger. "Your young man is quite the hero," Mrs. Blackwell remarked as they prepared dinner together. Nora blushed. "Mr. Fletcher isn't my young man, madam. I'd never met him before last night." Mrs. Blackwell smiled knowingly. "Well, he certainly risked a great deal to save you. Not many would ride so close to a fire like that. Horses are naturally afraid of flames." "I owe him my life," Nora said softly, remembering the determination in Noah's eyes as he'd urged her to jump. "He's a good man. Been with us 3 years now. Hard-working, honest, never causes trouble like some of the younger hands." Mrs. Blackwell paused in her work, giving Nora a maternal look. "And unmarried, though plenty of local girls have set their caps for him." Nora felt her cheeks grow warmer still. "Mrs. Blackwell, I hardly think—" "Oh, don't mind me, dear," the older woman laughed. "Just an old woman's observations. Now help me with these potatoes." As they worked, Nora found herself asking more questions about Noah Fletcher, where he came from, how long he'd been a cowboy, what sort of man he was. Mrs. Blackwell answered willingly, painting a picture of a young man who had left his home in Pennsylvania at 18, seeking adventure in the West. He'd proven himself reliable and skilled with horses, rising quickly to become one of Mr. Blackwell's trusted hands. "He keeps to himself mostly," Mrs. Blackwell said. "Reads more than the other boys' actual books, not just those dime novels. Sends money home to his mother every month. A responsible sort." By the time they finished preparing dinner, Nora had a much clearer picture of her rescuer and found herself even more intrigued. It was late the following day when Noah returned with Lawrence and Martha Lawson. Nora ran to her parents as they dismounted, throwing herself into their embrace with tears of relief. "Oh, my darling girl," Martha sobbed, holding her daughter tight. "When Mr. Fletcher told us what happened, we thought we'd lost you." Lawrence Lawson, a tall man with the weathered face of a farmer, turned to Noah with naked gratitude in his eyes. "Young man, I cannot begin to thank you for what you've done. My daughter is everything to us." Noah shifted uncomfortably under the praise. "Anyone would have done the same, sir." "No," Lawrence said firmly. "Not anyone. You risked your life, and we won't forget it." The Lawsons spent the night at the Circle B, making plans for their future. Their homestead was gone, along with nearly everything they owned, but they still had their land and each other. Lawrence spoke of rebuilding, though it would take time and resources they didn't have in abundance. "You're welcome to stay here until you can get back on your feet, Mr. Blackwell offered. "We can spare some lumber from our last mill run, and I'm sure the hands would be willing to help with the building." Noah, who had been quiet throughout dinner, finally spoke up. "I'd be happy to help, sir. I've done some carpentry work before." His eyes met Nora's across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection forged in fire and strengthened by the light of day. Nora smiled softly, and Noah found himself unable to look away from the gentle curve of her lips, the warmth in her hazel eyes. For the first time since arriving in Montana, Noah Fletcher felt the stirrings of something he'd never expected to find in this wild territory, a reason to stay in one place. The rebuilding of the Lawson homestead began a week later. True to his word, Mr. Blackwell provided lumber and allowed several hands, including Noah, to help with the construction when they weren't needed for ranch work. The neighboring homesteaders also pitched in, as was the custom when disaster struck one of their own. Nora and her mother stayed in a small cabin on the Circle B property, previously used for visiting relatives. Each day, Nora would ride out with her father to the homestead site to help with what she could, preparing meals for the workers, clearing debris, and salvaging what little remained from the ashes of their former home. Noah found himself looking forward to these days more than he cared to admit. He volunteered for every opportunity to work on the Lawson place, rising earlier than necessary and often continuing after others had stopped for the day. He told himself it was because he'd made a promise to help, but he knew the truth was simpler. He wanted to be near Nora. For her part, Nora found her eyes drawn to Noah whenever he was present. She watched the easy strength with which he lifted heavy beams, the patient way he showed younger men how to properly join wood, the quiet authority he commanded without ever raising his voice. He was different from the other cowboys, less boisterous, more thoughtful. When he spoke, people listened. One evening, as the sun was setting and the other workers had departed, Nora brought Noah a cup of coffee where he was finishing some detail work on what would become the front porch. "You should rest," she said, offering him the steaming cup. "You've been working since dawn." Noah accepted the coffee gratefully, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. "I want to get this section finished before tomorrow. Rain's coming." Nora nodded, glancing at the darkening sky to the west. "How can you tell? The wind changed direction about an hour ago. Smells different too." He took a sip of coffee, regarding her over the rim of the cup. "Your father taught me that. He knows this land well." "Yes, he does." Nora smiled, sitting on a nearby stack of lumber. "He says you're a quick learner. That's high praise from him." Noah set aside his coffee and returned to his work, measuring a board carefully. "Your father's a good man. You're fortunate to have parents who care for you so deeply." "What about your family?" Nora asked. "Mrs. Blackwell mentioned you send money to your mother." A shadow passed over Noah's face. "My father died when I was 14. Mining accident in Pennsylvania. Left my mother with 5 children to raise. I'm the oldest." He marked the board with a pencil, his movements precise. "I left home at 18 so there'd be one less mouth to feed. Send back what I can." Nora was quiet for a moment, watching him work. "That's very honorable." Noah shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's what a man should do." "Not all men would," Nora pointed out. "Just as not all men would ride through fire to save a stranger." Noah stopped his work then, looking up at her. The fading sunlight caught in her auburn hair, setting it ablaze with golden highlights. She was beautiful not in the showy way of saloon girls or the refined manner of Eastern ladies, but in a real, vital way that made his chest ache. "You weren't a stranger," he said quietly. "Not really. I saw you at the mercantile in town once, last winter. You were helping an old woman carry her packages to her wagon." Nora's eyes widened. "You remember that?" Noah nodded, returning to his work so she wouldn't see the emotion in his eyes. "You were wearing a blue dress. You smiled at me as I passed. I tipped my hat to you." "I don't recall," Nora admitted, trying to remember the encounter. "No reason you should, but I remembered." He finished cutting the board and set it in place. "When I saw someone trapped in that fire, I didn't know it was you, but when I got closer and recognized you." He trailed off, hammering a nail with perhaps more force than necessary. "What?" Nora prompted softly. Noah paused, hammer in hand. "I just knew I couldn't let anything happen to you." The simple honesty of his words struck Nora deeply. Before she could respond, fat raindrops began to fall, quickly increasing in intensity. "We should get inside," Noah said, gathering his tools. "Your father would have my hide if you caught cold on my watch." They hurried into the partially completed structure, taking shelter in the one corner that already had a roof and walls. The space was small, forcing them to stand close together as the rain pounded down outside. "Looks like you were right about the weather," Nora said, acutely aware of Noah's presence beside her in the dim enclosure. "It'll pass," he replied, his voice low. "Weather changes fast here." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the rain. Nora could feel the warmth radiating from Noah's body, could smell the clean sweat and sawdust on his skin. When she looked up at him, she found his eyes already on her, intense and questioning. "Miss Lawson," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "I think after all that's happened you might call me Nora," she said gently. "Nora." He said her name like it was something precious. "I'm not a man of many words, never have been, but I want you to know that a shout from outside interrupted him. "Nora, you out here, girl." It was her father, arriving with a wagon covered in oilcloth. "We should go," Noah said, the moment broken. "Your father will worry." Nora nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. As they dashed through the rain to the wagon, she couldn't help wondering what Noah Fletcher had been about to say, and why the interruption left her feeling so bereft. The new Lawson homestead was completed faster than anyone had expected, thanks in large part to Noah's dedicated work. By early autumn, the house stood finished, smaller than the original, but solid and well-built, with special attention paid to the kitchen that Martha Lawson had always dreamed of. On the day the family moved in, the neighboring homesteaders and ranch hands who had helped with the construction gathered for a celebration. Tables groaned with food, a fiddle player provided music, and for a few hours, the hardships of frontier life were forgotten in community and fellowship. Noah stood apart from the festivities, watching from the edge of the gathering. He had changed into his best shirt for the occasion, his dark hair still damp from washing. His eyes, however, never strayed far from Nora, who moved among the guests in a new calico dress, thanking everyone for their help. She was different now from the terrified young woman he'd rescued months before. The tragedy had changed her, bringing out a quiet strength he admired. She worked alongside her parents without complaint, never dwelling on what had been lost, only on what could be built anew. "You've been staring at my daughter all afternoon, Mr. Fletcher," a voice said beside him. Noah started, turning to find Lawrence Lawson regarding him with an unreadable expression. "Sir," Lawrence raised a hand to stop his explanation. "Walk with me." They moved away from the gathering, toward the newly planted orchard that would one day provide fruit for the Lawson family. "My daughter tells me you're thinking of leaving the Circle B," Lawrence said once they were out of earshot of the others. Noah nodded. "Mr. Blackwell has been good to me, but I've been considering moving on. There's talk of railroad work in Wyoming. Good pay." "Any particular reason for leaving now? After 3 years in one place?" Noah hesitated. The truth was complicated and involved the very man questioning him. Since the fire, his feelings for Nora had grown beyond simple admiration into something deeper and more painful. Watching her from afar, knowing she was beyond his reach, had become a daily torment he wasn't sure he could endure much longer. "Sometimes a man needs a change," he said finally. Lawrence studied him for a long moment. "My Nora would be disappointed to see you go. She speaks highly of you." Noah's heart quickened at this revelation, but he kept his expression neutral. "That's kind of her, not kindness, truth." Lawrence looked out over his rebuilt homestead. "You know, when I first came west with Martha, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and big dreams. Took me years of hard work before I could offer her a proper home." He turned back to Noah. "What I'm saying is, a man of good character doesn't need to have everything figured out before he states his intentions." Noah stared at the older man, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Sir, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that if you have something to say to my daughter, you shouldn't leave without saying it." Lawrence clapped him on the shoulder. "Now, let's get back to the celebration before my wife sends out a search party." As they returned to the gathering, Noah's mind raced. Was Lawrence Lawson actually encouraging him to court Nora? It seemed impossible, yet the implication had been clear. His heart pounded at the possibility that what he'd thought unattainable might actually be within reach. The celebration continued into the evening, with lanterns hung from the newly built porch casting a warm glow over the proceedings. When the fiddler struck up a lively tune, couples formed for dancing on the patch of hard, packed earth in front of the house. Noah watched as several young men approached Nora, each asking for a dance. She accepted politely, though her smiles never quite reached her eyes. After the third such dance, she excused herself and walked toward the water barrel at the side of the house. Before he could talk himself out of it, Noah followed her. "Miss Lawson," he said quietly as she dipped a ladle into the water. She turned, her face brightening when she saw him. "Mr. Fletcher, I was beginning to think you were avoiding me." "Never that," he assured her. "I just—" He cleared his throat, suddenly nervous. "Would you care to dance? With me, I mean." Nora's smile widened. "I would like that very much." As Noah led her back to the dancing area, his hand lightly touching her elbow, he was acutely aware of curious glances from the other guests. The fiddler had slowed to a gentle waltz and Noah hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "I should warn you, I'm not much of a dancer," he admitted. "Then we shall learn together," Nora said, placing her hand in his and her other hand on his shoulder. Noah's hand settled at her waist and they began to move to the music. He was stiff at first, concentrating too hard on not stepping on her feet, but gradually he relaxed, letting the rhythm guide them. "You dance better than you admit," Nora observed. "Good partner," Noah replied, his voice low. As they moved together, the rest of the gathering seemed to fade away. Noah was aware only of Nora, the delicate scent of lavender in her hair, the warmth of her hand in his, the grace with which she followed his lead. When the music ended, he found himself reluctant to let her go. "Thank you for the dance," Nora said, her cheeks flushed. Noah began, then stopped, seeing Martha Lawson approaching with a determined expression. "There you are, dear," Martha said, linking her arm through her daughter's. "Mrs. Peterson was just asking about your preserving technique." With an apologetic smile to Noah, Nora allowed herself to be led away. He watched her go, the words he'd wanted to say stuck in his throat. Later, as the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, Noah helped load the last of the borrowed tables into a wagon. He had just finished securing the load when he noticed Nora standing nearby, watching him. "I thought you might leave without saying goodbye," she said, stepping closer. "I wouldn't do that," Noah assured her, though in truth, he'd been considering exactly that, slipping away to spare himself the pain of a formal farewell. "My father mentioned you might be leaving the territory." There was a question in her voice, though she didn't ask it directly. Noah nodded, unable to lie to her. "I've been thinking about it. I see." Nora looked down, fidgeting with the ribbon on her dress. "When would you go? Soon, I suppose. There's nothing keeping me here." The moment the words left his mouth, Noah regretted them, seeing the hurt flash across Nora's face. "Nothing at all?" she asked quietly. Noah took a deep breath. It was now or never. "There is one thing that might keep me in Montana territory. One person, actually." Nora's eyes widened, hope kindling in their depths. "And who might that be, Mr. Fletcher?" "You," he said simply. "It's you, Nora, has been since the night of the fire, before that even." The confession hung between them, irrevocable. Noah waited, his heart in his throat, for her response. "Then I hope you'll stay," Nora said softly, "because I've found myself thinking of you far more than is proper for a lady to admit." Relief and joy surged through Noah. Emboldened, he reached for her hand, his rough fingers gentle against her softer ones. "Your father, I should speak with him." "I believe he would welcome the conversation," Nora said, a smile playing at her lips. "He admires you greatly, you know, says you're a man of action rather than words." "I'm trying to be better with the words," Noah admitted, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Especially when they matter most." "And what words would those be?" Nora asked, stepping closer to him. Noah looked into her eyes, finding the courage he needed in their warmth. "That I care for you, Nora Lawson. That I think about you every waking moment. That I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Nora's free hand came up to rest against his cheek. "I would have those words, Noah Fletcher, and I would return them with my whole heart." In that moment, under the vast Montana sky with the scent of autumn in the air, Noah did what he'd been longing to do for months. He leaned down and kissed her, softly and reverently, sealing their declaration with an action more eloquent than any words could be. When they parted, both breathless and smiling, Noah knew with certainty that his wandering days were over. He had found his home not in a place, but in a person, the woman he'd ridden through fire to save, who had in turn saved him from a lifetime of solitude. Over the following weeks, Noah courted Nora properly, with Lawrence Lawson's blessing. He continued working at the Circle B ranch, but spent every free moment either helping the Lawsons with their homestead or taking Nora on carefully chaperoned outings. Mr. Blackwell, upon learning of Noah's intentions, offered him a proposition that changed everything. A small parcel of Circle B land that bordered the Lawson property, along with the position of assistant foreman. "You're one of the best hands I've ever had," Blackwell told him. "I'd rather give you a reason to stay than watch you build someone else's dreams." The offer was more generous than anything Noah could have imagined. The land would give him and Nora, should she accept his proposal, a place to start their own home, while the promotion would provide the stable income necessary to support a family. On a crisp November afternoon, Noah took Nora riding to show her the property. They stood together on a gentle rise overlooking a meadow backed by pine forests, the Lawson homestead visible in the distance. "What do you think?" Noah asked, watching her face carefully. "It's not much now, but with work." Nora turned slowly, taking in the land from all angles. "It's beautiful, Noah, truly beautiful." "I thought," he cleared his throat nervously, "I thought we might build a house here if you wanted, if you'd marry me." Nora's breath caught, her eyes shining as she turned to face him. "Are you asking me, Noah Fletcher?" Noah fumbled in his pocket, producing a small velvet pouch. From it, he withdrew a simple gold band set with a modest pearl. It had cost him nearly all his savings, but seeing Nora's expression now, he knew it had been worth every penny. "Nora Lawson," he said, dropping to one knee before her, "you are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. I've loved you since before I knew what love truly was. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she found her voice, it was thick with emotion. "Yes, Noah. Yes, I will marry you." Noah slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to take her in his arms, lifting her off her feet in his joy. Their laughter echoed across the meadow, carrying on the wind to the mountains beyond a promise of happiness to come. They were married on Christmas Day, 1876, in the Lawsons' new home, with friends and neighbors gathered to witness their vows. Mrs. Blackwell cried openly while Mr. Blackwell and Lawrence Lawson exchanged knowing looks, both taking credit for the match in their own way. Nora wore a dress of ivory satin that Martha had ordered from Helena, while Noah looked uncommonly handsome in a new suit, his usually unruly dark hair tamed for the occasion. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Noah's kiss was more restrained than he might have wished, mindful of their audience, but the promise in his eyes when he looked at his bride left no doubt of his feelings. The celebrations lasted well into the night, with food and dancing and more than a few emotional toasts to the young couple. When they finally departed for the small cabin, Noah had prepared on their new land a temporary home, until they could build something more substantial. They rode through a light snowfall that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland. "Are you cold?" Noah asked, his arms secure around Nora's waist as they shared his horse for the short journey. "Not with you here," she replied, leaning back against his chest. "I don't think I'll ever be cold again." The cabin was simple but cozy, with a fire already laid in the hearth by thoughtful friends who had ridden ahead. Noah carried Nora across the threshold, setting her gently on her feet in what would be their first home together. "It's not much," he began apologetically, but Nora stopped his words with a finger to his lips. "It's perfect," she said, "because it's ours." Later, as they lay together beneath warm quilts, the fire casting flickering shadows on the log walls, Nora traced the lines of Noah's face with gentle fingers. "You ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "The fire?" Noah captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Every day." "Not the fire itself, but finding you. It changed everything for me." "For me as well," Nora agreed. "I lost my childhood home that night, but I found something far more precious." "What's that?" Noah asked, drawing her closer. "My future," she whispered against his lips. "And the man I was meant to love." Their kiss deepened, passion replacing tenderness as they celebrated their union in the most ancient of ways, two souls becoming one beneath the vast Montana sky. Spring came early to Montana territory in 1877, bringing with it new beginnings. The meadow on the Fletcher property erupted in wildflowers, painting the land in vibrant hues of blue, purple, and yellow. Noah and Nora had spent the winter planning their permanent home, and with the thaw came the start of construction. Noah had learned much about building from the reconstruction of the Lawson homestead, and he applied that knowledge to creating a home that would serve them for years to come. 2 stories, with plenty of rooms for the family they hoped to have, large windows to capture the stunning views, and a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings to watch the sunset. Nora proved herself an equal partner in the endeavor, not just in planning but in the physical work as well. She helped hoist beams, learned to shingle alongside Noah, and kept the books for their growing ranch operation. They had started with just a few head of cattle, a wedding gift from the Blackwells, but Noah's skill with livestock promised a prosperous future. By midsummer, the house was taking shape, and Nora had news of her own to share. On a warm July evening, as they sat on a partially completed section of their porch watching the sun sink behind the mountains, she took Noah's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We'll need to finish the nursery sooner than we planned," she said softly. Noah's eyes widened, his hand trembling against her belly. "Nora, are you saying?" She nodded, her smile radiant. "By winter, we'll be 3 instead of 2. Noah whooped with joy, lifting Nora carefully and spinning her around before setting her down with sudden concern. "Should I not do that? I don't want to hurt you or the baby." Nora laughed, pulling him down for a kiss. "I'm with child, my love, not made of glass." "But your concern is noted and appreciated." That night, Noah lay awake long after Nora had fallen asleep, his hand protectively covering the place where their child grew. He had never imagined such happiness, could be a beautiful wife who matched him in strength and determination, land of his own, and now a child on the way. From the lonely cowhand who had ridden through fire that night, he had been transformed into a man with everything to live for. "Thank you," he whispered to whatever providence had led him to spot that fire on the horizon, to urge his horse toward danger rather than away from it. Had he been even minutes later or taken a different route home that night, everything would be different. The thought was unbearable. Nora stirred beside him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Can't sleep," she murmured. "Just thinking," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "About how lucky I am, how perfect this is." Nora snuggled closer. "It's not luck, Noah, it's what we've built together." He smiled in the darkness, knowing she was right. Their happiness wasn't a stroke of fortune but the result of choices made, risks taken, and love freely given. They had forged this life from the ashes of tragedy, tempering their bond in the fire that had first brought them together. The remaining months of Nora's pregnancy passed in a flurry of activity. The house was completed before the first snow, a sturdy, handsome structure that immediately felt like home. Noah built a cradle from cherry wood, carving intricate patterns along its edges, while Nora sewed tiny garments in the evenings, her excitement growing as her body changed to accommodate their child. On a bitter cold night in February 1878, with snow piling against the windows and the wind howling like a wounded animal, Nora went into labor. Noah rode through the blizzard to fetch Martha Lawson and the local midwife, his heart pounding with fear and anticipation. The birth was long and difficult. Noah paced the hallway outside their bedroom, flinching at each of Nora's cries, feeling utterly helpless. When the midwife finally called him in near dawn, he entered to find Nora pale but smiling, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Noah," she said, her voice weak but triumphant, "meet your daughter." He approached the bed on unsteady legs, looking down at the tiny red face peering out from the blankets. A shock of dark hair, his hair topped her head, but the eyes that blinked up at him were all Nora's, clear and intelligent. "She's perfect," he whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch his daughter's cheek. The baby caught his finger in a surprisingly strong grip, and Noah felt his heart expand with a love so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "What shall we call her?" Nora asked, watching the interchange between father and daughter with tired happiness. Noah thought for a moment. "Emma," he suggested, "after my mother." "Emma Fletcher," Nora tested the name, then nodded. "It suits her, strong and beautiful." As the midwife and Martha left them alone with their new daughter, Noah settled carefully beside Nora on the bed, one arm around his wife, the other supporting their child between them. Outside, the storm had passed, and the first light of dawn filtered through the window, casting a golden glow over the new family. "I never thought I could be this happy," Noah confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "Nor I," Nora agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "When I stood on that burning balcony, I thought my life was ending. I never imagined it was just beginning." Noah pressed a kiss to her hair, then to his daughter's forehead. "I promise you both," he said solemnly, "I will spend every day of my life making sure you're safe and happy. You are everything to me." "We know," Nora assured him, her eyes drifting closed with exhaustion. "And we love you for it." As Nora slept, Noah held his daughter, watching her tiny expressions change as she dreamed her newborn dreams. Outside their window, the Montana landscape stretched white and pristine, untouched by human footprints after the fresh snow. It was a new beginning for the day, for their family, for their future together. Noah Fletcher, once a solitary cowboy with nothing to his name but his horse and his reputation, now held his entire world in his arms. And as little Emma yawned and settled against his chest, he silently renewed the vow he'd made the night he'd ridden through fire to save a stranger, to protect what he loved, no matter the cost. Life on the frontier was never easy, but the Fletcher family thrived in the years that followed Emma's birth. Noah's small cattle operation grew steadily, benefiting from his hard work and natural understanding of the animals. Nora managed their household with efficiency and warmth, making their home a haven for family and friends alike. Emma grew into a spirited child with her father's dark hair and her mother's quick mind. When she was 3, a brother joined the family, William Lawrence Fletcher, named for both grandfathers. 2 years later, another daughter completed their family, Sarah Martha Fletcher, a delicate beauty with her mother's auburn hair. By 1885, the Fletcher Ranch was known throughout the territory for its quality stock and the hospitality of its owners. Noah had expanded their operations to include horse breeding, developing a line of sturdy, intelligent mounts that were sought after by ranchers and the army alike. Nora had started a small school in one of their outbuildings, teaching not only their children but those from neighboring homesteads who otherwise would have had no formal education. On the 10th anniversary of the fire that had brought them together, Noah surprised Nora with a special gift. While she was visiting her parents with the children, he had a stonemason create a small fountain in the garden behind their home, a symbol of water triumphing over fire, of life continuing despite tragedy. When Nora returned to discover it, tears filled her eyes. "It's beautiful, Noah. But why now?" 10 years ago today, I found you in that fire," he explained, taking her hands in his. 10 years of loving you, building with you, creating a family with you. I wanted to mark it somehow." Nora reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines that a decade of Montana sun and wind had etched around his eyes. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been riding by that night." "I don't," Noah said firmly, "because it couldn't have happened any other way. I was meant to find you, Nora, to save you, yes, but also to be saved by you." "Saved by me?" she questioned, her head tilting in confusion. Noah nodded, drawing her closer. "Before you, I was just drifting. No real purpose beyond the next paycheck, the next cattle drive. You gave me a reason to build something lasting, a reason to become the man I always hoped I could be." "Oh, Noah," Nora whispered, deeply moved by his words. "You were always that man, I just helped you see it." Their kiss was interrupted by the sound of childish laughter as Emma, William, and Sarah came running around the corner of the house, faces bright with excitement. "Papa, Mama, Grandpa Lawson says there's going to be a harvest festival in town next week with a real band from Helena," Emma announced, her 8-year-old face alight with anticipation. "And horse races," added 5-year-old William, bouncing on his toes. "And candy," 3-year-old Sarah concluded solemnly, as if this were the most important detail. Noah scooped up his youngest daughter, settling her on his hip. "Is that so? Well, I suppose we'll have to attend, won't we?" The children cheered, and Nora smiled at her husband over their excited chatter. In his eyes, she saw the same love and devotion that had been there from the beginning, undimmed by the passing years and the everyday challenges of frontier life. That night, after the children were asleep, Noah and Nora sat on their porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him in a position so familiar it felt like an extension of themselves. "You ever regret it?" Noah asked suddenly. "Staying here in Montana, you could have had an easier life back east." Nora looked up at him, surprised by the question. "Regret it? Noah Fletcher, how could you ask such a thing? This is exactly where I want to be, where I'm meant to be. Even with the harsh winters, the droughts, the isolation, even with all of that, she affirmed. Because I have you, I have our children. I have a life that matters, here in this place we've built together. She paused, studying his face in the moonlight. Do you regret it? Noah's answer was immediate and certain, not for a single moment. From the night I carried you away from that fire, there's never been anywhere else I wanted to be except by your side. Nora smiled, settling back against him as the swing moved gently in the night breeze. Then we're exactly where we should be. As they sat together, a shooting star blazed across the sky, its fiery trail briefly illuminating the land around them before fading into darkness. Nora made a silent wish not for anything new or different, but simply for more of this. More years with the man she loved, more chances to watch their children grow, more quiet evenings beneath the endless Montana sky. Noah tightened his arm around her, as if reading her thoughts. I love you, Nora Fletcher, he said softly. More today than yesterday and not as much as tomorrow. And I love you, she replied, reaching up to touch his cheek. My hero, my husband, my heart. Their lips met in a kiss that held the warmth of a decade's love and the promise of decades more to come. Around them, the night was peaceful, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote, nature's music, accompanying the continuing story of two people who had found each other in the most desperate of circumstances and forged a love strong enough to withstand any fire. The Fletcher Ranch continued to prosper in the years that followed. Montana achieved statehood in 1889, bringing changes to the territory that had been their home for so long. The railroad expanded, towns grew, and the untamed frontier gradually gave way to civilization. Yet through it all, Noah and Nora maintained the values that had sustained them from the beginning. Hard work, devotion to family, and unwavering love for each other. Their children grew tall and strong, each finding their own path while honoring their parents' legacy. Emma, with her father's determination and her mother's compassion, became a teacher, eventually taking over the school Nora had started and expanding it into a proper regional institution. William inherited his father's affinity for ranching, working alongside Noah to continue building the Fletcher livestock operation. Sarah, the youngest, surprised everyone by developing a talent for medicine, eventually studying in Helena before returning to establish a small practice serving the rural communities around them. In 1896, 20 years after the fire that had brought them together, Noah and Nora hosted a celebration at their ranch. Friends and family gathered from miles around, including the now elderly Blackwells, who had been such an important part of their story. During the festivities, Noah pulled Nora aside, leading her to a quiet spot beneath the old cottonwood tree that had been there since before they built their home. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. Nora smiled, accustomed to her husband's sentimental nature on anniversaries. Noah Fletcher, you've already given me everything I could ever want. Not quite everything, he replied, producing a small velvet box. Inside was a gold locket, intricately engraved with their initials intertwined. Nora gasped softly as Noah opened it to reveal tiny portraits of their 3 children on one side and a miniature painting of their home on the other. It's beautiful, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Open the back, Noah urged gently. Nora turned the locket over, finding a small catch she hadn't noticed. When she pressed it, a hidden compartment opened, revealing a tiny scrap of charred fabric. From your nightgown, Noah explained. The one you were wearing the night of the fire. I found it caught on my coat button afterward and kept it all these years. A reminder of how close I came to never knowing you. Deeply moved, Nora reached up to frame his face with her hands. Though 20 years had silvered his temples and carved lines of experience around his eyes, to her, he was still the brave young cowboy who had ridden through flames to save her life. "You are the most remarkable man I have ever known," she said softly. "And I am grateful every day that fate brought you to me that night." Noah turned his head to kiss her palm. "Not fate," he corrected. "Providence." As they rejoined the celebration, Nora wore the locket proudly around her neck, her hand often rising to touch it throughout the evening. It represented everything their life together had been: beauty rising from ashes, strength forged in fire, love that had not only endured but deepened with each passing year. The party continued long into the night, with music and dancing under the stars. Noah and Nora opened the dancing together, moving with the same natural harmony that had characterized their marriage. Though they had both changed with the years, Noah's strong frame carrying the evidence of decades of physical labor, Nora's slender figure softened by the births of their children, there was a timeless quality to the way they moved together, as if their bodies remembered that first dance at the celebration of the rebuilt Lawson homestead so many years before. Later, as the gathering wound down and guests began to depart, their children approached them with raised glasses. "A toast," Emma announced, her voice carrying across the yard. "To our parents, Noah and Nora Fletcher, who have shown us what true love looks like for 20 years. To the strongest woman and the bravest man I know," William added, his expression uncommonly serious. "To the best parents anyone could wish for," Sarah concluded, her eyes shining with emotion. As glasses were raised all around and cheers erupted, Noah and Nora stood hand in hand, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. In that moment, surrounded by the family and community they had built together, they knew a contentment that transcended all the hardships they had faced. That night, as they prepared for bed in the home that had sheltered their family for nearly 2 decades, Nora paused by the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape. "What are you thinking?" Noah asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "I was thinking about that night," she replied. "How terrified I was, standing on that balcony with flames all around me, and then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I hadn't even had time to say." Noah rested his chin on her shoulder, their reflections visible in the glass. "I still remember the exact moment I saw you there. I've never been more afraid in my life, afraid I wouldn't reach you in time." "But you did," Nora said softly, turning in his arms to face him. "You've always been there exactly when I needed you, Noah Fletcher." "And I always will be," he promised, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. As they prepared to retire, Nora carefully placed the new locket on her dressing table, running her fingers over its surface one last time. Within its golden case lay the physical reminders of their journey together, their children, their home, and the scrap of fabric that symbolized their beginning. But the true treasure, she knew, was not in the locket itself, but in the love it represented, a love born in fire, tested by time, and still burning as brightly as ever after 20 years. In the soft lamplight of their bedroom, Noah watched his wife with undimmed adoration. 2 decades had passed since he had carried her from the flames, yet his heart still quickened at the sight of her. His soul still recognized its other half in her presence. "I love you, Nora Fletcher," he said simply, as they settled into bed. "And I love you," she replied, curling against him in the familiar way of long married couples. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come." Outside their window, the Montana night spread vast and starry above the land they had tamed together. The ranch slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that it was built on the strongest of foundations, not just timber and stone, but courage, perseverance, and a love that had begun in the heart of a fire and would continue to burn brightly for all their days. The years continued to pass, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The turn of the century ushered in new technologies and ideas that transformed the Montana they had known. The Fletcher Ranch adapted with the times, introducing modern farming methods while maintaining the personal touch that had always been their hallmark. By 1906, Noah and Nora were in their 50s, their children grown with families of their own. Emma had married a fellow teacher and lived in Helena, where she had become principal of a girls' school. William had built his own home on Fletcher land, continuing the ranching tradition with his wife and 3 sons. Sarah, after her medical training, had married a doctor she met in her studies, and they had established a small hospital in the growing town nearby. Grandchildren were the joy of Noah and Nora's later years. 7 in all, ranging from toddlers to teenagers, they filled the Fletcher home with laughter and energy whenever they visited. Noah proved himself a patient and imaginative grandfather, teaching the children to ride, fish, and appreciate the wild beauty of Montana, just as he had taught his own children years before. One summer evening, as they sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Nora noticed Noah rubbing his left arm, his face drawn with discomfort. "Are you all right?" she asked, instantly concerned. "Just tired," he assured her, though the pain had been coming more frequently lately. "Been working too hard, I suppose." Nora wasn't convinced. "I'm having Sarah look at you when she visits tomorrow. No arguments." Noah smiled at his wife's tone, knowing better than to protest. After 30 years of marriage, he recognized when Nora would not be swayed. The next day, their daughter examined Noah thoroughly, her professional demeanor temporarily replacing her usual warmth. When she finished, her expression was troubled. "Papa, your heart isn't as strong as it should be," she said directly, knowing her father preferred honesty to gentle evasions. "You need to rest more, work less." Noah frowned. "I've never been one for sitting idle, Sarah." "I'm not asking you to sit idle, I'm asking you to be sensible." Sarah took his hand, her eyes pleading. "We need you around for many more years, Papa. All of us do." After Sarah left, Noah found Nora in their garden, tending to the late summer vegetables. Without speaking, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, burying his face in her neck. "She told you?" Nora asked quietly. "Yes." "And will you listen to her?" Noah sighed, his breath warm against Nora's skin. "Do I have a choice?" Nora turned in his arms, her expression serious. "Yes, Noah Fletcher, you do. You can choose to be stubborn and work yourself into an early grave, or you can choose to take better care of yourself and stay with me for as long as possible." Her voice caught on the last words. "I'm not ready to lose you." Seeing the fear in his wife's eyes, Noah felt his resistance crumble. "You won't lose me," he promised. "I'll be more careful. William can take over more of the ranch work." "Good," Nora said firmly, blinking back tears, "because I have plans for our future that require you to be in it." True to his word, Noah began to delegate more responsibilities to William and the ranch hands. He found, somewhat to his surprise, that he enjoyed having more time to spend with Nora, reading in the evenings or taking leisurely rides across their property. They even traveled to visit Emma in Helena, a luxury they had rarely allowed themselves during the busy years of raising children and building their ranch. On a crisp October day in 1910, 34 years after the fire that had brought them together, Noah and Nora rode to the highest point on their property. The landscape spread below them in a patchwork of autumn colors: golden fields, russet woods, the silver ribbon of the river winding through the valley. Their home stood in the distance, solid and welcoming, smoke curling from the chimney. "It's still the most beautiful place on earth," Nora said, gazing out over the land they had nurtured for more than 3 decades. "Second most beautiful," Noah corrected, his eyes on her. Despite the passage of years, he still found her the most captivating sight in Montana territory. Nora smiled, recognizing the look in his eyes. "Flatterer." "Truth-teller," he countered, reaching across to take her hand. They sat in companionable silence for a time, their horses grazing peacefully nearby. Finally, Noah spoke, his voice thoughtful. "You remember what you asked me once?" "About whether I ever regretted staying in Montana," Nora nodded. "I remember. It was many years ago." "My answer's still the same," Noah said. "Not for a single moment, but I've been thinking lately about all we've built here, not just the ranch, but our family, our place in this community. It makes me wonder." "Wonder what?" Nora prompted when he trailed off. "If that fire was the worst thing that ever happened to you, or the best," Noah finished, watching her face carefully. "You lost so much that night." Nora considered his words, her eyes drifting back to the landscape below. "I lost things," she agreed. "Possessions, memories, but what I gained." She squeezed his hand. "Noah, that fire brought you to me. It changed the course of my life in ways I could never have imagined. Yes, there was loss, but there was also the beginning of everything that matters most." Noah's expression softened with relief. "I've thought about it often over the years, whether I truly saved you that night or whether you would have found another way out, whether I deserved the thanks I received." "You deserved every bit of it," Nora assured him. "And yes, you saved me. Not just from the fire, but from a smaller life than the one we've built together." She leaned across the space between their horses to kiss him softly. "My hero, then and now." They rode home as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land. At the ranch house, their youngest grandchildren were waiting, having been dropped off by William for an overnight stay. 7-year-old Thomas and 5-year-old Rebecca rushed to greet them, their faces bright with excitement. "Grandpa, will you tell us a story tonight?" Thomas asked, bouncing on his toes in a manner that reminded Noah powerfully of William at the same age. "What kind of story would you like?" Noah asked, lifting Rebecca into his arms as they entered the house. "The one about the fire," both children chorused. It was their favorite tale, though Nora suspected they liked it mainly for the dramatic rescue rather than the romance. "Again," Noah pretended to consider. "I believe you've heard that one before. Please." Rebecca's eyes, so like her grandmother's, pleaded with him. "Very well," Noah conceded with a wink at Nora. "After supper." Later, with the children bathed and in their nightclothes, Noah and Nora sat in the parlor, a grandchild on each of their laps. The fire in the hearth cast a warm glow over the familiar room, illuminating the photographs and mementos of their life together. "Once upon a time," Noah began, his deep voice settling into the storytelling cadence the children knew so well, "there was a brave young woman who lived in a house not far from here." "That's Grandma," Thomas interrupted, as he always did at this point. "Indeed it is," Noah agreed. "One night, while she was all alone, a terrible fire started in her house." The children listened, wide-eyed, as Noah recounted the tale they knew by heart but never tired of hearing. He described the flames, the smoke, the fear as Nora stood trapped on the balcony. Then he told of the cowboy who saw the fire from far away and rode to help. "Was he handsome?" Rebecca asked dreamily. "Very handsome," Nora confirmed, smiling at Noah over the children's heads. "The most handsome man I'd ever seen." Noah continued the story, describing how he had called for Nora to jump, how he had caught her and carried her to safety just before the house collapsed. The children gasped and clutched at each other, though they knew the ending well. "And then, what happened?" Thomas prompted, unwilling to miss any detail. Then the cowboy took the young woman to a safe place where she could wait for her parents to return, Noah said. And while they were waiting, something magical happened. They fell in love, Rebecca supplied, clapping her hands. That's right, Nora said softly. They fell in love, and do you know why? The children shook their heads, waiting for the answer. Because, Nora continued, her eyes meeting Noah's across the space between them. Sometimes the thing that seems like the worst moment of your life can actually be the beginning of the best part. The fire was frightening, but it brought Grandpa to me, and that was worth everything. Noah's eyes shone with emotion in the firelight. After all these years, the depth of his love for Nora still took his breath away at times. That she could see their meeting born in terror and desperation, as a blessing never ceased to humble him. As the children grew sleepy, Noah and Nora tucked them into bed, then returned to the parlor to sit together before the dying fire. Noah put his arm around Nora, drawing her close against his side. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For letting me be the hero of your story." Nora smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You've been the hero of my story for 34 years, Noah Fletcher, and you will be for all the years to come." Outside, the Montana night wrapped itself around their home like a protective embrace. Inside, the warmth of their love kept the darkness at bay. Just as it had since the night a cowboy had ridden through smoke and flames to save a woman he didn't yet know, but was destined to love for the rest of his days. As the second decade of the 20th century unfolded, the world changed rapidly around Noah and Nora Fletcher. Automobiles appeared on the roads near their ranch. Telephones connected them to their children in ways that would have seemed miraculous in their youth. And the Great War in Europe cast a shadow even over their peaceful corner of Montana. In 1916, 40 years after their fateful meeting, Noah and Nora celebrated their anniversary with a small gathering of family. At 64 and 59, respectively, they had weathered the years well, though Noah's heart condition had gradually worsened, forcing him to take an increasingly supervisory role in ranch operations. William now managed the day-to-day running of the Fletcher Ranch, with his oldest son, James, showing every sign of continuing the family tradition. Emma and her husband had retired from teaching and moved back to be closer to family, settling in a small house in town. Sarah's medical practice had grown, and she had trained several younger doctors who helped serve the expanding community. The grandchildren, now ranging in age from teenagers to young adults, brought constant activity and joy to the ranch. The oldest, James's sister Catherine, had recently announced her engagement, ensuring that a fourth generation of Fletchers would soon be established. On a mild September evening, Noah sat on the porch of the home he and Nora had built, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Nora joined him, settling into the swing beside him with the easy familiarity of long-married couples. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noting his contemplative expression. "The past," Noah admitted. "The future, how quickly it all goes by." Nora took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his as they had countless times over 4 decades. "Having regrets, not regrets," Noah clarified. "Just awareness of how precious it all is, how lucky we've been." They sat in comfortable silence for a time, watching the light fade from the sky. In the distance, they could see William's house, lamplight glowing in the windows. Closer by, their youngest grandchildren played a last game before being called in for the night, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "I've been meaning to show you something," Nora said eventually, reaching into her pocket. "I found it yesterday while going through some old things." She handed Noah a small, tarnished object. Looking down, he recognized the button from his old coat, the one that had caught the scrap of Nora's nightgown on the night of the fire. "You kept it all these years?" he asked, surprised. Nora nodded. "Just as you kept that piece of my nightgown." A reminder of how our story began. Noah turned the button over in his palm, memories washing over him. "I remember this coat, wore it until it was more patch than original material." He looked up at his wife, his eyes soft with recollection. "You were so brave that night, Nora. Standing there with flames all around you, trusting a stranger enough to jump into his arms." "Not brave," Nora corrected gently. "Desperate. The bravery was all yours, riding toward danger instead of away from it." Noah closed his fingers around the button, feeling its weight, the weight of history, of choices made, of a life built on the foundation of that one pivotal moment. "Do you ever wonder," he asked slowly, "what would have happened if I hadn't been riding by that night? If I'd taken a different route home or left the cattle drive a day later?" Nora considered the question. "I used to in the early years, but not anymore, because it couldn't have happened any other way, Noah. We were meant to find each other, you riding through that smoke, me jumping from that balcony. Two lives that were supposed to become one." Noah smiled, returning the button to her hand and closing her fingers around it. "Keep it safe another 40 years. "At least," Nora promised, leaning against him as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. That winter was particularly harsh, with blizzards sweeping down from Canada and temperatures dropping lower than many could remember. Noah's health suffered in the bitter cold, his breathing becoming labored, his energy diminished. Sarah visited often, concern evident in her eyes as she monitored her father's condition. On a frigid January morning in 1917, Noah woke with a strange sense of urgency. Despite the cold, he insisted on going out to the barn to check on a mare that was close to foaling. "Let William handle it," Nora urged, worried by the grayish tinge to her husband's complexion. "I'll be fine," Noah assured her. "Just need some fresh air." Reluctantly, Nora helped him into his heavy coat and watched from the window as he made his slow way through the snow to the barn. When he hadn't returned after an hour, an uneasy feeling settled in her chest. Pulling on her own coat, she followed his tracks across the yard. She found him in the mare's stall, sitting on a bale of hay with a tiny foal cradled in his arms. The mare stood nearby, seemingly content with the arrangement. Noah looked up as Nora entered, his face alight with a joy that temporarily masked his illness. "Look at her," he said softly. "Born just after I got here, perfect little filly." Nora knelt beside him, stroking the foal's velvety nose. "She's beautiful, Noah." "I want to call her Phoenix," Noah said, carefully transferring the newborn to her mother's side. "Born from the ashes of winter into new life." Something in his tone made Nora look at him sharply. "Noah, what's wrong?" He shook his head, taking her hand as they both rose. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's exactly as it should be." He looked around the barn, built by his own hands so many years ago. "I was just thinking that I've been blessed beyond measure. A man couldn't ask for more than I've had." Nora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter cold. "Noah Fletcher, don't you dare talk like that. You've got many years ahead of you yet." Noah smiled, pulling her into an embrace. "Of course I do. But when the time comes, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, I want you to know that I've had a full life. A good life. The best a man could hope for." Nora held him tightly, her face pressed against his chest where she could hear the labored beating of his heart. "I know," she whispered, "but I'm still not ready to let you go." That evening, Noah insisted on having the family gather for dinner. Emma and her husband came from town, Sarah and hers from their home near the hospital, and William's family from their house across the property. The dining room was filled with conversation and laughter, as 4 generations of Fletchers shared a meal. After dinner, Noah asked for everyone's attention. Standing at the head of the table with Nora beside him, he looked around at the faces of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchild Catherine's new baby, barely 3 months old. "I wanted you all here tonight," Noah began, his voice steady despite his weakened condition, "because I need to say something important." He paused, his eyes moving from face to face. "I've lived a blessed life. When I rode into Montana as a young man with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back, I never imagined the riches I would find here, not gold or silver, but something far more precious." He reached for Nora's hand. "I found the love of my life. Together, we built this ranch, this family. Everything you see around you grew from a single moment, a moment when a frightened young woman trusted a stranger enough to jump into his arms." Noah's eyes met Nora's, filled with the same devotion he had shown her for 40 years. "That trust has been the greatest gift of my life. I've tried every day to be worthy of it." There was a quality to his words that silenced the room. Even the youngest children seemed to understand that they were witnessing something significant. "I want you all to know," Noah continued, "that whatever happens in the days and years to come, our story, mine and your grandmother's, is one of triumph. Of love overcoming fear, of beauty rising from ashes. Remember that. Hold on to it. And know that the legacy we leave isn't in land or livestock, but in the love that binds this family together." As Noah finished speaking, there was a moment of profound silence before William raised his glass. "To my father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The bravest, wisest, most honorable man I've ever known." "To Grandpa," echoed James, following his father's lead. "To great-grandpa," Catherine added, cradling her infant son. As glasses were raised around the table, Nora looked at her husband through tears. In that moment, she knew with terrible certainty that he was saying goodbye. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Noah moved with unusual deliberation, as if memorizing every detail of their room, their routines, their life together. When they finally lay side by side in the darkness, he reached for Nora's hand. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "For what?" she asked, though she knew. "For leaving you first. It's not how I would have chosen it." Nora turned to face him, her hand coming up to touch his cheek. "Noah Fletcher, don't you dare apologize. We've had 40 years together, 40 beautiful, blessed years. That's more than most people ever get." Noah covered her hand with his own. "I need you to know something, Nora. From the moment I saw you standing on that balcony with flames all around you, I've loved you. Every day, every hour, without reservation or regret." "I know," Nora whispered, tears spilling onto her pillow. "As I've loved you." "Promise me something," Noah said, his voice growing weaker. "Promise you'll remember the good times, that you'll find joy in our children and grandchildren, that you'll know always that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." "I promise," Nora said, her voice breaking. "But you have to promise me something too. Anything, wait for me. Wherever you're going, wait for me, because I can't imagine even eternity without you." Noah smiled in the darkness, his hand tightening around hers. "I'll wait, however long it takes." They lay together in silence after that, the only sound their breathing, her steady, his increasingly labored. Eventually, Noah spoke again, his voice so faint Nora had to lean close to hear him. "You remember what you said to me the night we were married, about not being cold again as long as I was with you?" "I remember," Nora whispered. "I want you to know that you did the same for me," Noah said. "You warmed places in my soul I didn't even know were cold. You brought light to every shadow." Nora couldn't speak past the knot in her throat. Instead, she moved closer, laying her head on his chest as she had done countless nights over their 40 years together. Beneath her ear, his heartbeat was faint but steady, the most familiar rhythm of her adult life. "Sleep now," she said softly. "I'm here." Noah's hand came up to stroke her hair one last time. "My Nora," he murmured. "My heart." Those were the last words he spoke. Sometime in the night, as snow fell softly outside their window and the moon cast silver light across their bed, Noah Fletcher's heart finally gave out. He died as he had lived quietly, with dignity, and with the woman he loved by his side. Nora felt the moment he left her. Something shifted in the room, in the air, in the very fabric of her existence. She didn't call out or weep. Instead, she remained where she was, her head on his chest, her hand over his silent heart, until the first light of dawn crept through the window. Only then did she rise, gently kissing his forehead before going to wake William with the news that his father was gone. The funeral was held 3 days later in the small church that Noah and Nora had helped build decades earlier. Despite the bitter cold, people came from miles around to pay their respects to a man who had been a pillar of the community for 40 years. The church overflowed with mourners, many standing outside in the snow to hear the service through open windows. Nora sat in the front pew, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her face composed despite her grief. She wore the locket Noah had given her on their 20th anniversary, the tiny scrap of her burned nightgown still preserved inside. Throughout the service, her hand rose occasionally to touch it, as if it connected her to Noah even now, when the minister invited family members to speak. William was the first to stand. He spoke of his father's integrity, his work ethic, his devotion to family and land. Emma recalled his patience, the way he had taught his children to read by lamplight after long days of ranch work. Sarah remembered his gentleness, how he had supported her unusual choice to pursue medicine when many fathers would have objected. Finally, it was Nora's turn. She moved to the front of the church with the quiet dignity that had characterized her whole life, turning to face the congregation that represented 4 decades of their life in Montana. "My husband," she began, her voice steady despite her grief, "was a man of few words but profound actions. He showed his love not through grand gestures or flowery speeches, but through unwavering presence, constant support, and daily kindness." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, so many lives touched by Noah Fletcher's existence. "Most of you know how our story began," she continued. "On a night much like this one, cold and dark, with danger pressing close. A night when a young cowboy saw flames on the horizon and rode toward them instead of away. A night when he called to a frightened girl to trust him, to jump from safety into uncertainty." Nora touched the locket at her throat. "What you may not know is that Noah saved me not just once, but every day of our life together. He saved me with his steadfast love, his unwavering faith, his absolute conviction that we were meant to find each other that night. And he was right." Her voice finally broke on the last words, but she gathered herself, determined to finish. "I stand before you today not just in grief, but in gratitude. Gratitude for 40 years with the best man I have ever known, for 3 children who carry his strength and integrity, for grandchildren and a great-grandchild who will never forget his stories and his wisdom." Nora looked up, as if she could see beyond the church ceiling to the heaven she believed awaited. "Noah Fletcher rode through fire to reach me on the worst night of my life. And every day since, he has been the light that guided me home, the strength that held me up, the love that made everything worthwhile." She touched the locket one final time. "He waits for me still, I believe. And when my time comes, I know I'll find him there, hand outstretched, ready to catch me when I fall." As Nora returned to her seat, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. The minister hardly needed to add anything to her eloquent tribute. After a final prayer, the congregation moved to the small cemetery beside the church, where Noah was laid to rest beneath a pine tree, with a view of the mountains he had loved. The months that followed were difficult for Nora. Though surrounded by family and supported by the community, she felt Noah's absence like a physical pain. The house they had built together seemed too large, too empty without his presence. She found herself talking to him often, especially in the evenings when they would have sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. Spring came late that year, as if nature itself mourned Noah Fletcher's passing. When the snow finally melted and the first wildflowers appeared, Nora began to feel a subtle shift in her grief. The sharp, constant pain gradually gave way to a softer ache still present, but bearable. One warm May morning, Nora walked to the small rise where she and Noah had often ridden together. Phoenix, the filly born on the day Noah had said his unspoken goodbye, followed at her heels like a faithful dog. The young horse had bonded with Nora in the months since Noah's death, seeming to sense her need for companionship. Standing on the rise, looking out over the ranch that had been their life's work, Nora felt a sense of peace steal over her. The land stretched before her, green and vibrant with spring growth. In the distance, she could see William working with the cattle, his sons beside him. Closer to the house, his wife tended the garden Nora had planted decades before. Smoke rose from the chimney of Emma's house in town, and on the road from the direction of Sarah's home, a rider approached, likely one of the grandchildren coming to visit. Life continued. Their legacy lived on in the land they had nurtured, the family they had raised, the community they had helped build. Noah was gone, but what they had created together remained strong, vital, and growing. "I miss you," Nora said aloud, knowing somehow that Noah could hear her. "Every day. Every hour. But I'm keeping my promise. I'm finding joy in our family. I'm remembering the good times." A warm breeze stirred her hair, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. In that moment, Nora felt Noah's presence as surely as if he stood beside her, his strength, his love, his unwavering support. He was waiting for her as he had promised. But he was also with her still in every sunrise over the mountains, every new calf in the spring, every grandchild's laugh. Phoenix nudged Nora's hand, bringing her back to the present. Smiling, she stroked the young horse's nose. "Yes, girl, it's time to go home." As Nora made her way back toward the house, she carried with her a renewed sense of purpose. There was still life to be lived, love to be given, stories to be told. And someday, when her own time came, Noah would be there just as he had been on that fiery night so long ago, ready to carry her to safety in his strong arms. Until then, she would honor his memory by living fully, loving deeply, and ensuring that the tale of the cowboy who rode through smoke and flames to save the woman who would become his wife was passed down through generations of Fletchers, yet to come, a story of courage, of providence, and of a love that even death could not diminish.